Sony's PlayStation Portable, a handheld that got so many iconic games over the years. It had 3D platformers like Daxter, RPGs like Final Fantasy, hell, it even had full-on open-world titles like Grand Theft Auto, many of which still hold up to this day over 20 years later. Jesus Christ, I am old. Now look, I love the PSP, and I could go on and on listing all the cool titles it got over the years, but that's only the beginning of what this classic handheld has to offer. Because underneath all its well-known official titles, the PSP has a whole underworld of bootleg and homebrew games made by the community that's still very active to this day. I'll provide links for each of these projects I talk about so you can look into them or even play them yourself. So, let's take a look at some weird but really cool FPS remakes and bootlegs for the PSP, and see what sort of crazy stuff the community has been able to whip up over the years. So I figured that we should start out with one of the most well-known PSP homebrew games out there with NZP, which is short for something I can't say on YouTube without copping the banhammer, but I'm sure you all get the idea. It's meant to be a remake of COD Zombies for the PSP, more specifically the original World at War version of the game mode, and it's actually really fun. It's the usual wave-based zombies formula, hunkered down in an area and survive as long as you can. Buying weapons from the wall or the box, upgrading them with the Pack-a-Punch, and purchasing questionable juices at various perk machines. The game runs on the Vril engine, which is made specifically for NZP and built using different parts and optimizations from a couple other Quake engine ports. The project has been around in one form or another since around 2009, and a lot of work has gone into it over the years. It also doesn't use any assets from COD itself, so everything for the game was remade from the ground up.
I wish I could meet the chick who sang that jingle.
It only has a handful of official levels, but there's a separate section that contains a bunch of community-made maps to try out as well. I love COD Zombies, and this is easily one of my favorite homebrews out there. And what's even crazier is that it's not just on the PSP. It also has versions for the PS Vita, the Switch, 3DS, and even WebGL. Yeah, you can just load it up in your browser and even play co-op with other people. Hell, the team even has documentation that outlines how you can create and modify your own maps for NZP using Trench Broom. Honestly, this project could have a whole video of its own, and maybe I'll explore that in the future. But to put it simply, it's damn awesome, and the team behind it has been consistently pushing updates every few weeks or so. Definitely one that I would recommend checking out, as it's a ton of fun to play, especially with some friends. Now we come on to the Valve bootlegs, and here we've got the classic, Counter-Strike, and man, there are a lot of them out there. Now since most of these are just forked versions or mods, I'll instead just mention the two games that are kind of the original CS homebrews. Those being CS-DM PSP and CSGO PSP, both created by ST1X51, which is a name you'll see pretty frequently in the PSP homebrew scene. These were built using the Quake engine, and this is going to be a common theme in this video because the majority of FPS homebrew games on the PSP use some form of a Quake engine port. I decided to mention both of them at the same time because they are quite similar in a lot of ways. CS-DM was the original based on the DM mod for PSP, which I couldn't really find anything about, but I'm assuming DM just refers to the deathmatch game mode from one of the many PSP ports of Quake. It's pretty much what you'd expect for a recreation of Counter-Strike 1.6 on a PSP, overall just with less content. There's only a small selection of maps and weapons on offer in comparison, but what's there is actually surprisingly close to the original game overall. I think the biggest difference to note here is that the movement definitely feels a lot more sluggish than what you'd expect for Counter-Strike or Quake. CSGO PSP, on the other hand, is technically the newest version of the two, with its last update being sometime in 2023. This one is built off CS-DM and is pretty much the same gameplay-wise, except it contains a lot more CSGO-related content, most notably being the sounds. But they're the new 2017 CSGO sounds, so it makes me hate my life. It's got the cool early 2000s weapon skins that you would find in any virus-loaded community server back in the day, but most importantly, it's got the fancy new CSGO versions of some maps, like Train for example. Yeah, just how I remember it. Hell, it's so accurate it even has that classic ear-destroying menu music we all know and love. There's no bomb defusal or hostage mode here, so the only option is DM, which is probably a good thing because playing competitive CS on a PSP would probably make me pop a blood vessel. But there is bot support, so you can actually test the game out and play around a deathmatch here. The bots aren't exactly the most intelligent. Friendlies just kind of stick to you like glue, and the enemies will absolutely unload on whatever comes into their sight right away. Not a lot of content overall, but hey, it works. And even though they're using the Quake engine, both of them look pretty close to the original game for Homebrew remakes. And to me it's worth checking out just for the CSGO nostalgia alone. Next up we've got Quartal, a remake of Valve's famous Portal. Just a quarter of it. This one is made by a group called Team Unsilenced. They originally made this for a PSP Homebrew competition in 2013, where they ended up placing 3rd overall. There's only a few levels here, so it's not like a full-on remake of Portal or anything like that. But the big question was, does it actually have the main concept that makes Portal, well, Portal? I was pretty skeptical of this one and thought there was no way it wasn't going to be janky as hell at the very least, but to be honest, it worked good, actually really good. I mean, it's not as smooth as the original game, but who cares? It'd only really bug out if I shot one of the portals in between the floor and the wall, but that probably checks out, you know, physics and all. I'll admit I'm pretty garbage at Portal as it is, so I'm obviously not the best candidate to be testing these levels out. I was just mainly curious to see if the portal gun itself actually worked, and I can confirm that it does work. And just playing around with that feature alone makes this homebrew worth checking out. And of course, I gotta try it for science.
Hey, you. Finally awake.
Whoa. Keeping up with the Valve theme here, we've got Left 4 Quake. And if you couldn't already guess, it clearly runs on the Quake engine. In fact, it was so clear that when I tried to start a new campaign from the menu, I was actually teleported into Quake itself. This one is made by Ribcaged Entertainment, and the only version that I could find was a demo from around 2013 when the last update was posted. The demo only has one level, a 3-story building filled with, you know, zombies. Just like in Left 4 Dead, the goal here is to get to the end of the level, which happens to be the rooftop in this case. So you just kinda run through the halls blasting away zombies until you get to the end.
Oh my god, it's Christmas!
The interesting thing about this project is that the team seem to have some big plans for it, judging by their ModDB page. There's other development screenshots that show special infected like the Hunter and some other custom models, and they even had a website with a forum set up for the game, which unfortunately isn't up anymore. It's pretty simple, there's not a lot of content, so not a whole lot more to say about it. But I'll give credit where it's due, because I think if this project got further along with more levels, weapons, and other content, it would have been a pretty cool experience. Now I was pretty excited for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 when it was announced, until I remembered that things, you know, cost money. So, oh boy was I excited when I found S.T.A.L.K.E.R Portable, a remake of S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow Chernobyl right on my PSP. This one was developed by Q-Team, and while I couldn't figure out exactly what engine it uses, I'll take a wild guess here and judge by the menu screen and say it might just be related to Quake. It's also pretty experimental, as most of the exclusion zone is pretty barren, when it renders properly, that is. But if you've played S.T.A.L.K.E.R before, it's pretty easy to recognize some of the areas. You start off in Rookie Village, where the trader wants you to find some important information being carried by a stalker who has conveniently gone MIA. At least that's what I could read, because the font at this resolution is absolutely ass. Other than some rookies walking around, a handful of dialogue pieces, and some packs of rabid dogs to shoot at, there isn't really much else I could find to do, so I just walked around to explore a bit. The project has only had a few public releases from what I could gather, and the last official update was in 2019 on ModDB, but someone has gone through and released an English version with a few other tweaks as well. Even though it's missing most of the game, I can't help but be pretty fascinated by this one. I mean, just the idea of S.T.A.L.K.E.R on a handheld. Come on, man, that would be sick. Another thing I found pretty weird when I was researching into this one is that GSC Game World were supposedly working on an actual S.T.A.L.K.E.R game for the PSP. It was never officially announced, but it was mentioned in an interview with Oleg Yavorsky in 2009, where he said that they had been prototyping a PSP game but didn't have the resources to get it off the ground. So there you have it, some weird but really damn cool FPS remake projects for Sony's old PSP. Like I said in the beginning, I've left all the links below for each of these projects, and I'd highly recommend checking them out. Even if you don't really want to play them, just to look into them is kinda cool and support the creators in the community. I know it might sound like I'm ripping on these a bit, but at the end of the day, they are entirely free games made by fans in their spare time as little passion projects. Even though some of them may be rough around the edges, I just find it fun to explore these and, well, of course, crack my usual stupid ass jokes along the way. But we're really just scratching the surface for this handheld's homebrew scene, because there's a ton more to talk about out there. So let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see, and maybe, just maybe, I'll subject myself to more early stage carpal tunnel syndrome for another video.